Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Mental illness is prevalent in all aspects of society, and no longer is it the shameful family secret to be locked away in the institutions of the past centuries. Mental illness does not discriminate. It can and does affect and impact all of us. Mental illness is a serious medical issue, and it can't be overcome through just willpower, and it's not related to a person's character or intelligence. The impact of mental illness within the Australian population is becoming increasingly apparent, with 45% of Australians aged 16 to 85 having experienced a mental disorder at some point of their life. This equates to 7.3 million Australians. 1 in 5 Australians aged 16 to 85 experiences a mental illness in a year. It's encouraging to know the issue of mental health is being taken with the seriousness it requires. Recently, a mental health conference was held in my electorate of Dobell, which coincided with World Mental Health Day on the 10th of October. And I was honoured to be requested by the organisers to open this conference, an honour that I humbly accepted. Hosting a gathering of outstanding professionals in their field on a broad range of mental health specialities is an achievement for the Central Coast, and I was proud to be part of this event. As the only local member of parliament in the region to officially open a summit addressing a major national health issue, it demonstrates not only the role the government can play in accepting and beating mental health challenges, but also the role of the Central Coast community. One of the topics raised at the summit was the increasing amount of returned servicemen and women who are experiencing mental health issues upon their return from active service, in particular post-traumatic stress disorder. And it was identified that there is an increased need for mental health service to specifically cater for our returned servicemen and women, as the type of mental health issues they experience can be unique and must be catered for appropriately. And it was a privilege to be able to attend this summit, and I again thank Sue Rigney and her team from Healthy Care for organising and hosting the event. On the Central Coast, 4.5% of hospital admissions in 2011-12 were of a mental health nature, and statistics highlight the growing need for accessible mental health services for our community. Mental illness usually strikes individuals in the prime of their lives, often during adolescence and young adulthood. All ages are susceptible, but the young and the old are especially vulnerable. Alarmingly, it's estimated that 65% of people with mental illness do not access any treatment, and it's estimated that 72% of males do not seek help for mental disorders. On the Central Coast, we are lucky to have the provision of quality support organisations, though I do appreciate the need for more services and increased resources and funding. Quality support services in the community keep people well for longer and more connected with their family, friends and community, and with a better quality of life at less cost than psychiatric hospital beds. As our understanding of the impact of mental illness grows, it's important that we look at new ways to provide services and assistance to our community. And daily I'm made aware of the impact of mental health issues, particularly on the Central Coast. When I hear stories of 8-year-olds presenting at school self-harming and saying they're depressed, we have a serious problem on our hands. Our statistics are frightening, and the pressure being placed upon existing services is reaching breaking point. And while there are numerous reasons for the growing demand for assistance and support, the prevalence of substance abuse in the Central Coast is a stark reminder of the need to act. The rise of 112% over the previous 2 years in the usage of methamphetamine and ice is indicative of the crisis we are facing on the Central Coast, as well as across the country. And in May this year, I convened a Central Coast Ice Summit to address the serious rise in the use of methamphetamines and the impact on families and the broader community. In raising this issue, I note that the final report on tackling ice in our community has been presented to the government, and outcomes and recommendations from this report are expected to commence implementation shortly. A multi-pronged approach to combat usage of this dangerous drug is no doubt required, and I'm ready and willing to support education, increase access to health service for addicts and enforcement of the law against those associated with this fatal substance. Addressing the use and availability of ice can certainly help limit one significant cause of mental illness, and I'm hugely supportive of curbing the impact of ice in our community and seeing a reduction in psychotic incidents presenting at our emergency departments. On the Central Coast, we are known for our beaches, lakes, valleys and sporting achievements, to name just a few, but sadly there is a darker side for which, unfortunately, we're nationally known. This includes high rates of domestic violence and, up until recent years, one of the highest rates of youth suicides. In discussing mental health in our community, it would be remiss of me not to mention the topic of suicide. The most recent data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics indicates that 172 Central Coast families have been directly impacted by suicide in suburbs across my electorate in recent years. The Senate committee held in 2010 estimates the number of people immediately affected by one suicide is 6. However, I maintain there be no possible way to determine how many people are truly affected by something of this nature. And I mention this sobering figure to reflect on how deeply mental health issues affect our community. And acknowledging the far-reaching impact of suicide, it is easily to see how a community-based approach to addressing this issue can be successful. And I am fortunate to represent an electorate with a number of organisations who share my interest in reducing mental health illness and its effects on our community. The work of Gosford North Rotary through their Save Our Kids program is a huge, beneficial and important cause. The volunteers of Gosford North Rotary Club, particularly Lester Pearson and Michael Sharp, undertake a number of initiatives to reduce youth suicide. And earlier this year, there was media attention regarding the work undertaken by Gosford North Rotary, highlighting a total of $50,000 which was raised by volunteers to fund Save Our Kids project. And I thank the entire Gosford North Rotary Club for their efforts, and I'm sure the whole community acknowledges the great work they do, particularly in this endeavour. I'm also proud to be a financial sponsor of this program and thank the other sponsors in my community for their commitment to Save Our Kids program. Now, many members of this House would also be familiar with the work done, which is undertaken by Lifeline to reduce the incidence of suicide. And I wish to bring awareness to their rollout of training programs, which are a great way to ensure everyone is able to respond to suicide risks should they arise. And Lifeline's Accident Counsellor Workshop is one program which equips those willing with the ability to step into the role of counsellor momentarily and to respond accordingly to people at immediate risk of suicide if a professional is unavailable. And when consulting with the Dobell Youth Advisory Committee, I raised the issue of mental health. Now, for the benefits of those not familiar with this committee, the Dobell Youth Advisory Committee is a group I established consisting of students from local schools who provide me with direct advice and input into issues affecting young people. And in addressing mental health with this talented group of young people, I was able to coordinate a roundtable workshop on the subject of mental health. And I was very fortunate to be joined by representatives from Headspace and also Central Coast Children and Young People's Mental Health. And we asked the committee to tell us what they believe the main causes of stress and anxiety among young people to be. And, naturally, they said, the role of social media and cyberbullying was front and centre. But they did say that the best way to address stress and anxiety is proven tools such as peer mentoring. Now, as I mentioned before, the impact of suicide is one felt by entire communities, and particularly the Central Coast community, given the tight-knit nature of our region. Many members will be familiar with suicide in their own communities. However, every once in a while we're confronted with a case which is reported in the media, and we're all prompted to rise to attention. As recent as last week, the story of Reece McNaughton was in the Daily Telegraph, reminding us all about suicide in young people. Now, known affectionately as Zephyr, due to his likeness to actor Zac Efron, Reece was a popular young man, a talented sports person, aspiring model, and he was heading towards a career in teaching. And to the outside, this Central Coast-born young man was the last person to be considered at risk. His friends have now commenced an awareness and fundraising campaign through the Movember website in an attempt to spread the word of their efforts to raise awareness and funds for mental illness. And this has also included a plea to Ellen DeGeneres and an open letter to Zac Efron to gain support. Now, the silent nature of suicide is the most lethal. And raising awareness to ensure those who battle inner demons are comfortable to discuss the issues they face has to be a priority if we're to reduce the rate of youth suicide. And in addressing this, I take my role as the local member very important, and working with how we can reduce the impact of mental illness within our community.